Hey APUSH students, let's cover everything you need for period 3. Before we start, print out the free speed review sheet that goes along with this video. The link is in the description below. Right now, go through period 3. Circle the people, events, and vocab that you don't quite remember so you know what you need to study. Then once you're confident you know that topic, you can check it off and move to the next one. Okay, here we go. Period 3 starts with the French and Indian War. This was the American side of the 7 Years' War. This is where the French and their Native American allies fought the British and the American colonists over the territory in the Ohio River Valley. This led to the Albany Plan of Union by Benjamin Franklin, who also created the join or die image to promote colonial unity. The British were victorious, and the war officially ended with the Treaty of Paris. France gave up all of its North American land to the British, whose boundary now extended to the Mississippi River. The American colonists flooded into the Ohio River Valley territory, upsetting the Native Americans living in the region. This led to Pontiac's rebellion, and the British troops were forced to help defend the colonists. This ended salutary neglect. The British troops maintained their presence in the colonies. King George III passed the Proclamation of 1763, and Parliament began taxing the colonies to help cover the war debts. The Sugar Act was the first passed to help raise revenue from the colonies. This was followed by the Stamp Act, which was the first direct tax. Colonists responded with the Stamp Act Congress, the formation of the Sons and Daughters of Liberty, who led the protests and the boycotts, and they claimed the phrase, "no taxation without representation." Parliament was forced to repeal the Stamp Act, but passed the Declaratory Act declaring absolute power over the colonies. Next, they passed the Townshend Acts taxing tea, glass, paper, and lead. This also set up a system of tax collectors and customs agents to make sure the taxes could be enforced. The presence of British troops and agents increased tensions, especially in port cities like Boston, leading to the Boston Massacre. Parliament also passed the Tea Act, forcing the colonists to only buy British tea. This led to the Boston Tea Party. The king responded with the Intolerable Acts. This included the Boston Port Act, the Massachusetts Government Act, the Administration of Justice Act, and the Quartering Act. The other colonies feared that Britain could do this to them as well, leading to the First Continental Congress. All but Georgia attended. At this point, colonists were forced to pick a side. You were either a patriot or a loyalist. The American Revolution officially started after shots were fired at Lexington and Concord. This forced all 13 colonies to meet again in the Second Continental Congress. There, they made the Declaration of Independence, they established the Continental Army, and they wrote the Articles of Confederation. Going into the war, England had one of the most powerful armies and navies. The large population made it easy to recruit additional troops, and they were able to fund and supply the war. But the Continental Army knew the land, were willing to engage in guerrilla warfare, and had an ideological commitment to independence. They also had the leadership of George Washington. There are 3 key events you want to know for the Revolutionary War. First, Valley Forge, where Washington's leadership helped keep the Continental Army together in the hardest winter campaign. Next, Saratoga, where the American victory cemented the alliance with France. And Yorktown, where the Continental Army and the French Navy forced the British to surrender. The war officially concluded with the Treaty of Paris. The British acknowledged the American independence, and they ceded their North American territory east of the Mississippi River. Now, we can't talk about the Revolution and not talk about Enlightenment. This was a period of intellectual and cultural change in Europe based on logic and reason. This played an instrumental role in colonists starting to question authority. This directly inspired Thomas Paine's Common Sense pamphlet, where he used logic and reason to prove that most of the colony's problems were the fault of the British. Why should a giant continent be ruled by a tiny island across the sea? His logic made complicated Enlightenment ideas easy for common people to understand, and we declared independence just a few months later. Jefferson included Enlightenment ideas in the Declaration of Independence as well, especially consent of the governed and natural rights. Now let's talk about the Articles of Confederation. After we declared independence, we needed a government for our country, so the Continental Congress wrote the Articles of Confederation. They wanted a weak government that couldn't rule with tyranny. It only included a legislative branch that could declare war, sign treaties, and request money. However, they couldn't tax or keep a standing army. They had no executive power to enforce anything and couldn't settle disputes between states. There were a couple successes under the Articles. They were able to sign the Treaty of Paris, officially ending the American Revolution. They also passed the 1785 Land Ordinance and the Northwest Ordinance. The struggles to govern under the Articles of Confederation reached their breaking point with Shays' Rebellion. Once the rebellion was finally put down, the colonies agreed that the Articles needed a revision. The problem was that the document was so flawed, the Founding Fathers had to abandon it altogether. They ended up creating a new form of government in what became known as the Constitutional Convention. One of the major issues debated at this meeting was representation. Small states wanted the New Jersey Plan, while larger states favored the Virginia Plan. Ultimately, they agreed to the Great Compromise. This formed a bicameral legislature. One house would have representation based on population, and the other would be 2 per state. The other heated debate was over slavery. While some representatives favored abolition, Southern states were unwilling to compromise on the institution. So the argument centered around whether the enslaved would count towards representation. This led to the 3/5 compromise. The Constitution set up the 3 branches of government. It set up federalism, where the power would be shared between the federal government and the states. A system of checks and balances was included so no one branch could become too powerful. Once the Constitution was finished, it went to the states for ratification. Factions developed between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. The Federalists wanted a stronger central government, so they wrote the Federalist Papers to convince the states to ratify the Constitution. The Anti-Federalists opposed the Constitution. They felt it made the federal government too strong. They also demanded a Bill of Rights be added before they would ever consider ratification. After ratification, the Constitution went into effect in 1789. Immediately following, James Madison wrote the first 10 amendments known as the Bill of Rights. Although the Bill of Rights was crafted to protect individual liberties, this did not extend to women. Instead, they were expected to stay home and raise sons that would support the Republic. In 1789, George Washington was elected the first president unanimously. He immediately set up his presidential cabinet to help advise him on important matters. He selected Thomas Jefferson for Secretary of State, Alexander Hamilton for Secretary of the Treasury, and Henry Knox as Secretary of War. One of the biggest foreign policy challenges Washington faced was the French Revolution. Despite the French being our allies during the American Revolution, Washington ultimately issues a proclamation of neutrality. The biggest domestic issue Washington handled was the Whiskey Rebellion, when Pennsylvania farmers protested the federal whiskey tax. Washington led American troops to put down the rebellion. This showed the power of the executive branch and represented a significant change from the Articles of Confederation to the Constitution. After serving 2 terms, Washington stepped down in 1796. Upon leaving office, he issued his farewell address, where he warned of the dangers of political parties and to avoid permanent alliances with foreign nations. Struggles both during and after Washington's presidency led to the formation of political parties in our first 2-party system. The Federalist and Democratic Republican parties debated economic policies, Hamilton's National Bank, and how America should respond to the French Revolution. These parties go head-to-head in the election of 1796. John Adams won, and he was our only Federalist president. The Adams administration was overshadowed by the French Revolution and the Quasi-War. When Adams sent a delegation to France to try and negotiate a peace, the French tried to extort the American diplomats in the XYZ affair. When this news reached America, it sparked outrage and increased tensions between the political parties. After facing heavy criticism, Adams passed the Alien and Sedition Acts. This made it illegal for the newspaper to criticize the government. Ultimately, Adams' handling of the French Revolution led to his political downfall, and he lost the election of 1800 to Thomas Jefferson. Now let's talk about what you might see on exam day. For causation, be ready to talk about the effects of the French and Indian War or the causes of the American Revolution. For changing continuity, you may see a question about changing American ideals over independence, or a change in the government from the Articles of Confederation to the Constitution. And for comparison, while you could see a question asking about the patriots and the loyalists, you're more likely to see a question asking about the difference in beliefs between the Federalist and the Democratic Republican parties. Check out the APUSH Ultimate Review Packet for more help like study guides, timelines, and practice essays. Follow the link in the description below for a free preview. If this video was helpful, like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.